play smart. Box Smart. Winners play smart.
Tackles and cleanouts at the breakdown have the highest risk for injury. Because tackles and breakdowns are managed reactively by referees and cannot be controlled proactively as with set pieces such as the scrum, referees must have zero tolerance for dangerous tackles and cleanouts and must sanction players accordingly.
Dangerous tackles and cleanouts include high tackles, which are above the line of the shoulders, shoulder charges or collision tackles where no attempt is made to grasp the player with the arm or arms, tip tackles or where the player is lifted, turned and dropped or driven into the ground while the player's feet are still in the air and where the head or upper body makes contact with the ground. Chop tackles, or commonly known as grass cutters. Cleanouts at a ruck is the only time an opponent can be played without the ball. However, cleanouts aimed at or around the head and neck have become far too commonplace and are extremely dangerous. Sharp shoulders, or charging in without arms and without trying to bind onto the player, also known as corkscrewing, is another unwanted occurrence that has crept into the game in recent times, which is deemed extremely unsafe, especially for the player being cleaned out. The first few topics have been dealt with in detail in the previous Box Smart course, including what referees need to do before matches. These clips can be found on the Box Smart website, boxsmart.com, and by visiting the Box Smart SA YouTube channel, which is also accessible via the website. The last few points on chop tackles and illegal cleanouts are very concerning and are current trends at the professional level of the game that can no longer continue unabated and simply cannot be allowed to filter down the age group levels.
Chop tackles. This is when the tackler dives in at the opponent's knees or shins, leading with his or her shoulder without making any attempt to grasp them. Often, these tacklers have to go so low that they are already down on the ground on one knee. This often happens around the fringes of the breakdown contest when opponents are picking and driving around the ruck. A trigger for the refs is to note how the ball carrier gets toppled and when his feet end up higher than his head as he falls to the ground. Tackling of this kind is extremely dangerous and the risk of serious injury to both tackler and ball carrier are becoming more evident. No stats are available as yet, as it is a technique that has only recently been identified for further scrutiny. However, there are enough concussions and spinal cord injuries as a result of heads and necks colliding with either the ground, the oncoming players, or their hard body parts to support this technique not being used. With the future of the ball carrier's ankles, lower legs, and knees added into the mix, combined with an increased opportunity for potential career or sport-ending injury to both players, is also good enough motivation not to use the chop tackle. If you have to go low, aim for the mid-thighs or the lower waist area. Lead with the arms and ensure that your head and neck is in a strong and safe position.
On another note, collision tackles are associated with more severe injuries and are more dangerous than legitimate tackles. In line with this, the scientific literature confirms that these or any other collision tackles have a higher propensity to injure ball carriers. Unfortunately, some of the research has also found that the involved referees penalized relatively few of these collision tackles and also relatively few tackles that were above the shoulder line.
Calling all rugby players, coaches, referees, parents, volunteers and fans. From the 3rd of January 2017, there will be a new, tougher approach to reckless and accidental head contact in the sport through 2 new categories of dangerous tackle. The 2 new categories of dangerous tackle are, number 1, reckless tackle, where a player knew or should have known, there was a risk of making contact with the opponent's head, but did it anyway. That also applies if the tackle starts below the line of the shoulders. And to grabbing, rolling or twisting around the head-neck area. Minimum sanction, yellow card. Maximum sanction, red card. Number 2, accidental tackle. This is where a player makes accidental contact with an opponent's head during a tackle, including where the ball carrier slips into the tackle. Minimum sanction, penalty. For full details and wording, go to worldrugby.org/player welfare.
Another scientific paper on catastrophic spinal injuries showed that in ball carriers, half of the cases were as a result of tackles that were coded as illegal tackles. This is an issue that everyone needs to seriously take note of, and that you, referees across the board, need to manage far better going forward.
Cleanouts at the ruck. The latest trend rearing its ugly head is that of the neck roll. When arriving players at the ruck are unsuccessful in the clean-out of their opposition and cannot drive their opponent off the ball, they then resort to grabbing the player around the neck and either rolling them to the side or hanging onto or twisting their heads and necks. This technique is better known as the crocodile cleaning technique or crocodile roll, except that in this case, the head and neck are targeted as opposed to the middle or waist. Rolling the player by his neck constitutes dangerous play, which can be substantially worsened with the twisting of the neck or choking holds applied, not to mention the risk of breaking someone's neck or injuring them badly. These grappling techniques have absolutely no place in the game, as the law quite clearly states that you may not target the head or neck area.